Welcome to Rebecca Sounds Reveille. As many of you know, I like to talk about fear and I like to talk about love because they are two emotions that really are the foundation of everything that we do. And with me today, I have a guest who is author of a book, Love is the Power. And he's not just an author. In fact, he's got a lot to say about things that are in the book and the things that he has written, but it's all culminated from a lifelong experiences of things that have happened from childhood up until even now and what will continue to evolve. And so with us today, you're going to find that our prolific guest is someone that you may already be familiar with. But before I get to the big, oh, I know who that is, and I'm sure just by looking at him on the screen now, you already know. But I do want to tell you, he has done so much research and he has searched for so long and has taken all of these things and has been able to invent and create something called quantum code technology. And this is something that I'm going to let him share more about in addition to his book and the things that we are going to be talking about today, moving from fear to love. And there's more. He's also created an app. And this heart app is absolutely unbelievable. You're going to find a lot of useful information in that as well. But that isn't all. He's also just been involved with some of the world's foremost experts, the scientific luminaries. They're just unbelievable. And he'll tell you why. As we talk to him today, Robert O. Williams, who is also a very talented and successful musician. You may know him as the saxophonist who played with the Beach Boys. Welcome to the show today, Robert.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for that very kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, I appreciate you being here, and I am just absolutely thrilled to talk about the topic that we have today. But it doesn't just start with moving from fear to love, and we just kind of go out of the blue. There is something that we have to talk about to build a foundation, and specifically in the foundation of which you have shared in your book, Love is the Power. And this is really important because we do need to understand all of these little things that have happened in our lives that create the bigger picture. And so you have an incredible story that started out in your childhood, and I would love to hear a little bit about that.
My childhood, I bet you if we took a raise of hands from your audience, I bet you I'm not the only one with this kind of unusual childhood. I saw nature spirits and fairies and little beings everywhere, and I saw auras and things that you could say most people didn't talk about. So that was my childhood. I was fortunate to have parents who just let me be in the backyard all by myself, meaning just with my human self, but then I also was able to see these other beings and I grew up with them. So that's a little bit. And then I had several experiences where I would leave my body and come back, and there were guides along the way and odd things like that. But I bet you I'm not alone, like I say. One of the things that I have known for a very long time is that there is a fundamental relationship between our physical bodies, our minds, our thoughts, our emotions, and you could say the larger truth of who we are. And that relationship is an ongoing discovery process. It's an ongoing. So when we think a thought, often we feel completely identified with that thought. We are what
Mm-hmm.
we're thinking. And when we feel an emotion, we are what we're feeling. And when there's pain or a sensation, we are what the sensation is. I always knew that there was something else. There was always something that was, you could say, the greater subjective part of that, those identities. And that led me into really being interested in just life, human life, and how we're confronted with these dilemmas of our thoughts, our emotions, our physical bodies, our pains, our sorrows, even our high moments, our ecstasies, our bliss moments, and that consciousness that's always taking in that information and interacting with it. So
Mm-hmm.
that is what I write about in my book, and I can kind of sum up my whole childhood as an exploration in that relationship.
Well, that's very interesting. And I think that a lot of times we tend to, as we get older, dismiss things because a lot of times adults don't believe what we're saying or want to attribute things that are happening to things that they cannot see. And you'll hear oftentimes children who are seeing or talking to imaginary friends, angels. There's different labels that they use for this, and you were able to identify that this was a real thing that was happening to you early on. And I'm wondering, as you grew up, did you start questioning this at all?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I questioned it. I doubted my own experience. I doubted my own reality. I doubted everything. And I can fast forward though. This is one of the wondrous gifts of being a parent. I have a 12-year-old daughter now, and remember those early years. And when she was 3 and 4, we had a big backyard, my wife and I, and we'd go out there, my daughter and I. And I've never stopped seeing these spirits and beings and celestial realities. And I these days, I'm sure of those realities, and I have confirmed them in different ways with different people and different circumstances. But one of
Uh-huh.
the wondrous moments, the most wonderful moments of my life was with my daughter, and I would see one of these spirits come out of the bushes and be interested in her, and she would see it, and she was maybe 3 or 4, and we both, and my wife would see, our eyes were both tracking the back and forth
Oh,
spirits. We even have a video of my daughter and I, looking off, and so she had or she has that gift of seeing clairvoyantly, and I feel that all children have that. And then, like you say,
mm-hmm.
there's the societal beliefs about the invisible world or the unseen, and we know
Yes.
the unseen, and it's all in your imagination. So it's a great opportunity for us to remember those times when I'll say it's not like there's a different context, or there's a different experience of looking at a physical human being or anything physical, and something that is uh, more translucent and more,
Okay.
yeah, there's a different way in which the nervous system responds to that. And
Okay.
yeah.
I was going to ask you about that to see if, for those members of the audience who are beginning to wonder, well, have I seen that? If there is a way to describe the sort of invisible to a visual mind so
Very
that
good.
someone can say, I understand exactly what he's talking about. I can absolutely identify with that.
Yeah. So we have our physical eyeballs, and
Uh-huh.
photons are reflected, and there's all kinds of wonderful science that explains how we can see things physically. Now, we also have our subtle nervous system. That's a whole nother conversation, a whole nother field of research. They call it the third eye. So when we are looking at things non-physical, we're actually using our third eye, or this subtle um, uh, energy structure, to register what's happening on that level. But our eyes, our physical eyes, are following. So if you can imagine, um, just anything, imagine your mother or your sixth grade teacher in our imaginations, and you really start to imagine, and you can kind of see her there. You can see, and if she goes left and right, the physical eyes will follow your imagination just automatically. You don't have to think about following. So in a sense, when I was looking at the little nature spirit with my daughter, and our eyes were going back and forth following the nature spirit, it wasn't our physical eyes that were seeing this. It was our third eye, and our physical eyes were just
Okay.
following what our third eye was registering. And this is a whole, this is why it's very uncomfortable for scientists who are really invested in just the physical world, because if you look at a microscope, you can't see it with your physical eyes. If you look at a telescope, and if somebody's saying I see something, then somebody else doesn't see it, or it doesn't show up on a camera, then it becomes either metaphysical or
Right.
craziness.
Right.
And to me, yes, my parents thought I was mentally ill, and they took me to psychiatrists and some doctors. And this is a long time ago, the 50s. And
Sure, sure.
you know, I have a funny story. So there was a doctor like, okay, so you're seeing all these things. I think I was 10 or 11. And so she checked me for a brain tumor. I didn't know at that point what, follow the light with my eyes, and did the up and down.
Okay.
Later found out that's how, if you have a brain tumor, it kind of shows up there somehow. Then she did my reflexes, my knee, how you sit there and they have that little hammer,
Yes.
and I'm thinking,
And who came up with that anyway?
it's just something that they did, to show that we're doing something here. We're testing something. Oh, okay.
Right.
His leg jumped out. He's normal. And so,
right. Exactly. Who would have thought?
Well, she said, no, he's normal. He's a normal little boy. It's in his imagination, but he's not mentally retarded or anything like that. So luckily, I was given a pass at that early age. But I realized that if I kept talking about it, it would upset too many people. So I kept it a secret. I did take a diary though, and I had my old diaries. I started when I was 9 or 10. And in the book, or for the book, I read those diary, entrances, and kind of relived that whole experience of whatever age I was writing.
This is absolutely incredible. But it doesn't stop there, because let's say, just rewind for 1 second. And, it's really interesting, because your parents are thinking, okay, there's something going on here, so we'll have him tested. Little do they know that you're incredibly intelligent at the time, because they're hearing these things, right? And then you go on to become this just unbelievable musician.
We all have our purposes. No matter what we think about ourselves, we all have our purposes, and we're all one thing that's evolving with a billion faces and a billion bodies and a billion personalities, which are all unique and all containing the whole at the same time, the whole of consciousness, the whole of possibilities. And so we can all, what we don't want to do is feel that our own location in the universe is less significant than anybody else's, because that's not part of the plan. The plan is for all of our individualities to evolve and to receive and give in unique ways, which will create our mass consciousness, which these days, as we all know, there is room for improvement. There is a quality of life that we can intuit, that we can feel. And some of us think it's just a lost cause, or a hope that is not valid. But in my experience, and we can talk more about that. There is a transition going on in mass consciousness as humans, as a human race.
Okay.
Yeah, and it has to do with time. It has to do with the phases of evolution and the seasons of life and so forth. And any of us who have that hope or have that feeling that life can be better, that there can be a reality with less suffering, less cruelty, especially less abuse. We all know
Yes.
too tragically that this is happening as we speak. So, is there a way to improve the quality of life? And in my point of view, there is not only a way; it is a ingrained potential that is will, whether we want to or not, will start showing itself as a global phenomenon. I don't know exactly when, but I see the
Okay.
symptoms of it already, and I certainly believe in it.
So in that, and some of the audience members may be thinking, well, what exactly does he mean by global phenomenon? Meaning that at some point, all of this is going to become more peaceful, and people's purposes is going to interconnect and begin to create something that is unbelievably wonderful, or is it something that is more catastrophic?
So here's my answer, and this is an empirical answer. It's based on my own experience. There's a profound reality that is
Hmm.
in all of us, and I'm calling that reality love. This is something that is greater than an emotion. I mean, we have loving emotions, and my 12-year-old has a file on her computer, cute boys I love. So there's different phrases, oh no, but there's different, we could use that word, and it's one of those words that can be used in so many different ways. I'm including this intrinsic reality that we are. And so there's a profound inherent truth that I'm calling love, that is
Uh-huh.
not something we achieve, not something we learn or earn. It is something that's revealed, and it's a sudden revelation in my own experience. We just,
Okay.
there's, sometimes we have hints. In fact, we always have hints of higher states of consciousness of this inherent love. We might be at a concert and the music is so beautiful, and everybody begins to sway with the music, and the musicians
Yes.
and the ticket sellers and the security playing with the Beach Boys. That was a common experience. Not every time, it wasn't
Uh-huh.
it wasn't guaranteed, but it was often that we'd all kind of, wow, we're all swaying. In those days we could do Bic lighters, and everybody's doing it. These days
Right.
with our cell phones. That is an example of a greater reality of love than we're used to. So we leave
Mm.
the concert, we feel high, we feel kind of sparkly. And I remember after the encores and the Beach Boys finishing, just that feeling. If we had that zone, if we had attained that level of consciousness where there was a unified field and we were all enjoying love, not just the particular song we were playing, but there was an interchange of that reality. People left very peacefully, and you could just see it. There was love in the room, and they'd go on, and who knows, one particular guy might have lasted 3 or 4 days, and 3 or 4 hours. Then we get back into patterns. But what I'm presenting here, and I am hoping that our intuitions can resonate with this profound truth, this profound reality, that love is at our core, it is our essence, and that awakening happens at concerts and maybe a walk at the beach, or just during the day, something could just inspire us, or we have an epiphany. Those are like
Uh-huh.
openings to information, to realities that are already there. We're not going out into space. We're just opening our consciousness to that which is inherently already here. So that is at first a sudden experience, and it generally, the outside of our lives don't change quickly. So I
Right.
had my epiphanies and my realizations my life looked very much the same. I had the same car, I had the same friends, you know. There was still suffering in the world. And at the same time, slowly my life did change. My body was able to heal itself from a disease that I'd been given only 6 months to live, and things like that do begin to happen. And if we get enough people, and here's the part of our intuition, if we have enough of coherence within that reality, that profound inherent truth of who we are, then there will be an influence globally. And that will, the physicists call it a quantum jump. It won't be an analog movement, if anybody knows those words. Quantum jumps are quite sudden. Here's an example. When a plant is in its seed state, it takes a long time relative to the rest of the life of the plant for that seed to break open, that boundary's destroyed, and there's lack of order in the seed, you know, becomes very disordered. Why? Because the forces of nature are saying it's time for the sprout. And already there, that's intelligence that's not isolated in the seed. It is in the seed, but it's also in nature. It's part of nature, right? So we are from nature. Our bodies come from the earth, and nature is our inherent governing intelligence. So the seed opens to the sprout, and then it bursts open, and now it's above the surface of the earth, and it becomes a green stem. And the green stem goes for a long, long time, and then there's an increase of disorder. The stem starts to break down. And if somebody were to look at that one point, they'd say, oh my God, there's something wrong with this stem. You know, there's cells that are falling down the side of the stem. There's disorder. But then the leaf comes out, the beautiful leaf comes out, and there's and it goes on and on. So that's like a natural course of, you could say, destiny, or a field of information that was like a blueprint that plant follows. And before the greatest transformation, the seed goes to the sprout, and I love your dog in the background.
I'm so sorry.
We love dogs. So the seed goes to the sprout, goes to the stem, goes to the leaves, each preceded by an increase of disorder or chaos. And if we didn't know the whole destiny of that plant, or the whole potential of the plant, we'd think something's wrong. We don't think something's wrong because we've seen plants grow, and then the greatest disorder, a lot of the cells go down, they go back to the earth, they don't transform into the flower. So now the flower doesn't look anything like the stem, doesn't look anything like the leaf, doesn't look anything like the sprout, doesn't look anything like the seed. It was all part of, the only difference is time and environmental conditions, and a purpose for those transitions to occur in the way they occurred. Humanity has gone through, let's say, the seed stage, the root stage, the sprout stage, forgot the roots go down too, and then the stem and the leaves. So you can imagine that in our modern history, we haven't seen our own humanness blossom any further than it already has.
Right.
And yet nature doesn't stop. Nature doesn't stop at the leaf. It might not turn into a flower, but it eventually will, with repetitive tries and so forth. That is also part of nature. So the human condition, not only has it been prophesized, and I found it in all the indigenous societies and religions and ancient texts, about a time when a mass transformation of consciousness will occur, because it's programmed in. It's not something that humans have to learn. It will be part of our own growth. So that's what I'm talking about right now.
This is very interesting, and I'm wondering about what we, as we're learning about the information that you have shared, and we have these epiphanies and these different types of realizations, are we supposed to do something with them at that time? Because that, as you said, is an indicator. That's our the little bell that goes off that's telling us, that this is a direction, or this is the way you should be feeling. What do we do with that? Or is it something that's in your book that we need to read?
uh, it's in my book, and I'll tell you.
Okay.
I'll speak to it. The what to do. This is why it's so wonderful to be a human being. Even though we love our dogs and we love plants, human beings, with a possible exception of maybe dolphins, a certain class of dolphins, and maybe some whales, but human beings have free will. We have the ability to shift our attention consciously. You
Yes.
know, our dogs are wonderful, but if we pay attention, they're so in the moment. They're not pondering their lives. They're not
Right.
thinking. They learn, and they learn what's safe, and they're so loving. Humans can ponder. We can ask, why am I here? We can
Very
ask,
true.
what is my purpose? We can even ask, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a option for our free will to even ask that question. And it's also a symptom of a certain state of consciousness that's been realized. So it's wondrously complex and wondrously simple when,
Uh-huh.
when we can ask the question, who am I? That's you can't ask it unless you have a certain amount of awareness that's
That
been,
makes sense.
yeah. And all now we could just ask, who am I, right? Now, if we have a very fast answer, I am so-and-so, I was born here and there and there and there and there, and we don't feel like we're any more than that, then give it some time. At some point, we'll know that we're more than those stories, because that's just what consciousness will do. And we'll wake
Uh-huh.
up and realize that's one aspect. It's kind of like, my hand, my finger, this is all part of me. But I'm not
Right.
saying I am just the fingernail. And,
Right.
and I'm not also saying I'm just my physical body or my thoughts or my emotions. It's an epiphany that's programmed in our consciousness, that one way or the other we will be able to ask the question. And then when we begin to answer, that's where we can choose where our attention goes. And here's the coolest thing that I've discovered. If we answer from a wound that we've had, or from a program that we've been subjected to, and I'm not saying anything bad about the educational system or parenting or anything, but if we answer based on that, then we'll actually feel this kind of a tug. It's a inherent kind of not quite feeling. And
Okay.
if we allow that mystery to just be there, that state of confusion, we allow that kind of like, I wonder if this is all who I am. And we
Uh-huh.
just accept that. We don't try to, no, this is who I am. We don't try to collapse into a thought process. The thoughts come and go. We allow that unanswered question to be. That's something we can consciously do. And then
Yes.
the next step is if there's something that we feel, if there's some negative emotion, we feel ashamed because we did something we regret, or we don't even know why, we just feel guilt or shame or fear. The one way is to tell us a story that makes us feel better. That's a temporary fix, and it's
Okay.
valuable. At a certain point, that negative emotion, or the emotion that is not a great feeling, that is a secret entryway into our own realities, into our own unique purposes. It's like
Mm-hmm.
what we are resisting the most actually is a doorway into our own truth. And it's programmed that way because we don't go there in a reactive state. We go there consciously. We are consciously willing to experience that fear or the grief. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
discrediting the horrors of life and the tragedies, and there's certain phases for this. But as we become conscious that we can shift our attention from our like our, where am I here? Maybe here, you know, this is kind of me. And if I consciously, now I'm down by my knees, I can feel my knees. Now I can consciously feel my feet. This is our free will, putting our attention here in our hearts. If we begin to feel ourselves coming from that place and allowing whatever the emotion is, and it's another way of loving. True love is not conditional. It doesn't
That's
say,
right.
it doesn't say, I will love you if you change. No, it says, I'm loving you now.
Yes,
But
and
with
that is
self,
for yourself too.
with self, that is the highest level of love for others, is if we ask ourselves, what am I feeling? What am I resisting? What am I fearing? And that comes up. And the example that I love using is being a father and seeing the mother of my daughter. When the child cries, the mother doesn't say, well, before I pick up the child, what's in it for me?
Right.
You know, I, you know what's the deal here? What's the, you know, who, why should I really love? But you know, it's an absurd thought, because
Right.
it's so part of being a parent, is particularly a mother. You don't have to learn to love. It is a natural. The child cries, you hold the child to your heart, and there are all kinds of wonderful things that are happening on the subtle levels. And I was able to see them with mothers and my own daughter and my wife, that subtle love, that unconditional love that comes before the milk or the burping or whatever the child needs. There is a
Yes.
programmed in. If it was just milk or burping or food, then the child would not need her mother. You could do it
Right.
mechanically, right? No,
That's right.
that doesn't work. I won't even go into those stories. The child needs to feel a human loving heart. And our
Yes.
own selves need or are looking for that relationship with our own inherent love. The way to tap into that is to consciously say, what am I thinking? What am I fearing? And as those feelings come up, we love them. We allow them. We hold them like we would an infant. We hold ourselves.
Yes.
And that automatically, just like with real mothers and their childs, it automatically opens the heart to access, ultimately to access the truth of our purpose, access our highest level of giving, and what we are here to do, what we are here to give and receive. It's an opening, and it's through the heart that those realities show themselves, not the mind, not our emotions.
Hmm.
The thoughts or emotions are like doorways into those heart domains.
Well, it's amazing that you're able to really articulate that so well, because I have really found over a number of years that when we are able to identify a fear that is going on within ourselves, we are then able to look at how to overcome that. And so when we challenge that and move forward, then we're expanding our circle and we are moving forward, and we're no longer in that state of fear. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, talking about moving forward from fear to love, this is an absolutely essential step.
Yes, it's programmed in us, but it's not an automatic, because we have the free will. And
Okay.
so these little hints that I referred to, where we feel higher love, like the Stevie Winwood song. And remember that higher love. Uh, artists, we all have an artistic side. It's the realm of poetry and music and dance and song,
Uh-huh.
and something that really the mind is in awe of, because the mind can't figure out why it's happy when we're dancing and singing. because
Uh-huh.
the mind says, well, what is it? The notes, is it a B flat minor seventh that makes us happy? Or is it the certain rhythm of our arms? There's a certain angle there, it's beyond the mind.
Right.
We all know it. We all know it.
Right.
Not every time, but we know our field of happiness in nonlinear or non-mental contexts. So pay attention to those times of our lives, and they'll happen every day. We'll between thoughts, between emotions, or bigger than the thought or bigger than the emotion, we'll have a sense of that love. Because right now, the innate, profound reality of the shifting from one state of consciousness to another, from one paradigm to another, from one phase to another, is active now on the planet. And as we are all part of the planet and part of nature, if we are alert for those moments of connectivity, moments of
Mm-hmm.
relief, moments of freedom, and then we come to our hearts. And that's something, because it is through this chakra, through this point of entry, that accesses the resolution of all the dilemmas, the freedom within the boundary, the freedom within our own boundaries. Like I said
Okay.
before, at first we don't see any dramatic change, but as we continue that practice, what can we do as we continue that practice? Oh, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? Love, love. And then if a thought comes to eat a certain food or to read a book or to do some therapy, or those will begin to work more effectively with the
Okay.
basis, with our own inner love as the basis for our activity.
Well, let me ask you, Robert, how does this intertwine with what you developed and invented in quantum code technology? Is this something that is a connectivity?
Yeah. Let's just say, well, what I discovered, I had several near-death experiences, and I write about that in my book. And when I would come back into my body, there was a domain or a dimension that was full of symbols. So
Okay.
what is the symbol? There are geometries, there are configurations, and over the last 30 years, I've been researching what those symbols are, what they represent. A symbol represents,
Oh, wow.
right? So most of us, for example, we know that if there's a treble clef or a little symbol like that in 5 lines, even if we're not musicians, we've probably seen that before. We say, okay, that's something to do with music. I'm not a
Right.
musician, so I don't know. There's notes there, I think. But the further along we understand what is behind the symbol, and as a musician, after a while, you don't think, oh, there's the treble clef, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You just see the symbol
Right.
and you play the note. The symbol translates into an action. In this case, I'm playing the note. Or in Mozart's case, he would see an entire symphony all at once, and he would write it down in symbols as music. But he saw.
Well, let me just interrupt you right there because I wanted to mention this earlier with what you were talking about, and then connecting that with what you're saying now is how much do you know how much of our brain it is that we actually are not tapping into?
Most we're not tapping into, absolutely. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, go on. This is just absolutely amazing.
So symbols. So I saw these symbols, and I also found them in almost every indigenous culture in their art. So we're even all the way back to Paleolithic, these cave drawings. They would
Uh-huh.
have a certain kind of mandala, which is a circular piece of art with certain relationships and stars and things like that. Now,
Yes.
what you could say, at least it's a theory, that the reason why they show up in all the indigenous cultures, they weren't sharing information, especially back in the old days,
Right.
same symbols, different kind of, maybe different way the artist was putting them on canvas, but the same symbols are showing up everywhere, because they're symbolic to our inherent consciousness. And as we
Uh-huh.
reach a certain point of consciousness, the symbols then turn into a level of consciousness or awareness. Just like the music turns into somebody singing, it just simply
Yes.
hardly even necessary, but reminds the mind, okay, here's how the song goes. So I discovered that there's 108 fundamental frequencies or symbols that are symbolic of a state of consciousness or a phase of evolution.
Okay.
The 108, there, it has to do with the 7 chakras and our minor chakras, and the whole conversation about subtle energies and the ancient understanding of nodal points, where the nervous system transduces our higher states of consciousness through our chakras, for instance. So the symbols in the old days, for instance, one of the symbols, I wonder if I can get my, so here's one of them. Here's like an example. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, that's a mandala. And that is an example of a symbol that has been hundreds of thousands of years, at least 5,000 or 6,000 years, where they can look at pieces of art. It shows up in all the different cultures. Now,
Yes, we initially got a full view and then a partial view and a full view again. But either way, even a partial view has insight as well. Go on.
they would actually, the Sanskrit seers would meditate on a certain symbol to develop the chakras. So if you, because
Okay.
the relationship, this is where it crosses over to modern science. The angles and the relationship of the geometries in the symbol as the symbol actually begin to resonate with those same geometries, those same ratios within our own psyche, or better, our own consciousness. So
Interesting. Okay.
here's another, I love this example. So why do we all agree that sunsets are beautiful? You know, did we all take a vote? How many people, let's take a vote. You know, are sunsets beautiful? The reason why we don't have to ask that question, and most of us, we look at the sunset and we just, oh, the color, even, the reason is that the geometries, when the sun hits the horizon, and if you
Yes.
do a mathematical analysis, this is where the mind can go in there and do, you know, get compasses and analyze the circumference and the ratio of the horizon. All those geometries are also in our own DNA. They're in our
Interesting.
own. So when we
Okay.
look at those geometries, we are resonating with our own selves.
I
And
understand. Okay.
when we look at plants and trees, those geometries, the Fibonacci series, and those are the geometries that we attribute to beauty, are our own geometries. They're in our bodies. They're in how our cells have evolved. They're in the DNA. There's all these amazing, you know, the ratios are the same in our little molecule of hydrogen as it is in the whole Milky Way, and all these different
Right.
fractal relationships. So we're seeing ourselves, and when we look at these symbols or feel the symbols, we feel nature's energy. We walk in the woods, we feel that. It's not like we have to think about feeling better when we're walking in the woods. And it's not just the fresh air. That's a factor as well. It's those
Right.
natural energies, those subtle energies that are resonating with who we are, and we're feeling better, and we're healing more quickly, and we become clearer, and our minds become sharper, and our ability to make decisions becomes more accurate, because nature has those innate information fields. And as we walk in nature, so the 108 frequencies, back to what your question is, I was able to identify them. And with the help of one of the most brilliant scientists on the planet, his name is Dr. William H. Tiller, Tiller. He used to be the chairman of the Department of Material Sciences at Stanford. He taught he taught the conventional class on how the earth creates crystals, quartz and amethyst and all the citrine, and what the earth has to go through. Isn't that a fact? I mean, it's way beyond, you know, it's a lot of
Yes.
mathematics. he also worked with me to take these ancient or these inherent frequencies, and we figured out a way to broadcast them over the airwaves, and then now broadcast them over the internet, which is,
Oh my.
and so you can receive them on your cell phone. And so when you download this app,
I was just going to ask you that.
so you download the app, you get it on. I mean, this is where, I mean, I'm still, it's happened in spite of myself, not because of me. You know, I'm looking at this phenomenon, working with Bill Tiller and a lot of, you know, a lot of other folks that I don't have time to list that are expert in their fields to come together with us. So you go to Amazon, or I'm sorry, you go to the App Store or Google, depending upon what kind of phone you have, and you just download it like a game or whatever. You see the globe spinning, you turn it on, and those natural frequencies that you are, that are often overridden or confused because of all the electronics and all the modern day stuff that's only part of the human condition in the last 100 years, the natural frequencies begin to resonate, become active, and you begin to feel that. And we did a 2-year study, double blind, published in a medical journal, that people with the app on, it's called the Heart Plus app, their physical hearts actually got healthier. So here we go. There's a paper that's bridging modern science with ancient wisdom.
This is absolutely incredible. And I'm sure that, boy, I think with the questions I have and the information that you have to share, we could go on for a really long time. And I know that our audience has to be fascinated, but they can obtain a lot more information through your book, through your site. So I'd like to, before we go, have you share where our audience can contact you, get a copy of your book, and you've already shared, but if you'll share again, a copy of the app.
Loveisthepower.com. Loveisthepower.com. You can go to Google or the App Store. It's $1.95, one-time fee, and you get it forever. And upgrades and stuff were no charge. And then you can go to Amazon. It'll link you to Amazon if you want to look at my book or buy the book. All on loveisthepower.com.
This is fantastic. I want to thank you so much for being on the show. You have really allowed us to gain some insight that I think many people knew about, maybe were afraid to think of it, maybe didn't understand it. And for those that didn't, there is an awakening happening now within them. And one of the things that I have always said is, and I didn't coin this term, but your perception is your reality. And so there is so much to that, and you're going to go in depth on so much more. And I think that you have been given this ability to speak and to share the information for a specific purpose as well. So I want to thank you so much for being on the show.
Rebecca, it's my pleasure. I can feel your audience, and what you're doing is really important, really awesome. So thank you, and thank all your listeners, all your viewers.
Oh, thank you. And I want to thank all of you for watching today. As you can tell, this is an opportunity here for you to be more aware and paying attention to the things that are going on within you, around you, and that there is significant reasons that we need to do so. But there's so much more. You definitely need to gain more information in this particular arena. And I think that Robert's book is one that's going to really be able to amplify some questions that you may have and amplify other thoughts and things that have maybe gone by the wayside that you just didn't want to address. Or maybe you know someone and you thought, oh goodness, they're kind of out there, but maybe they have a point to something. So this is a really good opportunity. I want to thank you so much for watching the show. I would like you to share this with your friends, your colleagues, and everywhere on social media. We really would like to help others be able to move from fear to love. There's so much more, and there's a lot coming our way, and we do really need to be aware of that. This episode of Rebecca Sounds Reveille has been brought to you by TLBTV and the Liberty Beacon Project. Thanks again for watching.